All right, guys, here we are. This is our residential purchase contract for real estate here for buyers. So when we're putting together our offer, this is what we're going to be going over. So we're going to kind of go over this as the buyer side of things today. So here is page 1. This says, "Attention buyer, this is a legal document." No kidding. So this is kind of a silly first page. Obviously, you guys want to read the entire contract before you sign it. We're going to go over kind of the highlighted Cliff Notes version here today. So here, when we scroll into, here's page 1 of the contract. So here's where the meat of our negotiation happens. So we want to make sure that we've got your name spelled exactly how you want it on title right here. And then we're going to be filling out the seller's names, the property address, and all the legal information here. So make sure that we've got it for the right property. Here's where we're going to put the full purchase price. So say we're buying a house for $500,000. We're putting $500,000 here. We're going to break that down into our earnest deposit, which is about 1% of that $500,000. And we're going to make sure that this money is delegated to go somewhere. So we're going to say to be applied towards total down payment at close of escrow. This line will line out your down payment, and here's where we're going to put our new financing amount, or if we're paying cash, it's just going to be one cash lump sum at close of escrow. So once we have a contract, meaning the seller has signed our offer and we've all agreed, we're going to be depositing a personal check into the title company. So the seller's not going to hold your money. I'm not going to hold your money. That's going to go direct to title. So remember, and we'll talk about this a little bit more on what their job is, but they're going to be that neutral third party that handles all of the money, processes the deeds, and coordinates back and forth with the mortgage people to make sure that the loan is good, facilitates signing, and does all of that stuff. So we are writing in when we're going to close. So we're going to pick a date and write that in here. This is generally the day that you're going to get keys. So we'll talk about signing as a couple of different days. This is going to be the day that we get keys and closing. That's going to be the actual close of escrow. So the possession, they're going to give you any of the keys that they have, common area keys, mailbox keys, any of that stuff. And that's when you'll actually be taking ownership and control over any assessments from that point on. So if we need to put in any addendums, generally we see a buyer contingency addendum, meaning that you are contingent on selling another property. An additional clause addendum might be a 1031 exchange or an all-cash appraisal. If you have a well, we'll have a domestic well water. If there's an HOA, lead-based paint. If we're assuming the loan, if we have a septic tank, if we're doing a seller carry or seller financing, if we have a short sale, or if there's solar, or if there's anything else. So at the moment, we're seeing COVID addendums, market conditions advisories. There's a couple of other addendums that we might be putting there. Then as a buyer, you'll sign on the bottom of all of these pages. So the fixtures on page 2 here, 1G, this is what comes with a house. So if the house we're looking at is occupied, there's probably some extra personal property in that home. This is what is going to stay. So if there's anything in here that you want to make sure does stay, that you absolutely love, a certain chandelier, or some curtains, anything like that, that will all be in here. And we can make extra mention of that with the sellers to make specifically clear that that is important to you. You can also check off if you want the fridge, washer, dryer, or any other personal property that might be there to throw into the sale. So if we are getting a loan, we're going to go into number 2 here for financing. All of our offers that we write are going to be attached by a pre-qualification form. So that means that you've already talked to a lender and they've handed over a document saying that, yes, you actually can qualify for this purchase and this mortgage. So by doing that, you invoke what we call a loan contingency. So basically, this whole contract is going to be contingent on you being able to get that loan that they gave you the pre-qualification for. So within 3 days of getting our contract accepted, that means that you are agreeing to submit your loan application. They're going to get all of the contract docs and kind of start the processes rolling on their end as well. So they have some very specific guidelines on when they can deliver documents to title after you sign certain milestones throughout that process. So make sure you're in touch with your lender throughout this whole piece so that we can make sure that that piece is not holding us up on closing at the end. So if for whatever reason you can't get that loan, it's what's called an unfulfilled loan contingency. That gives you the option to cancel and walk away with your earnest money. They're going to be the ones telling you about interest rates and which funds you're going to be needing to close. So whether that's a 5% down, 10%, 20%, whether you're putting 50%, and what your rates are going to be. That's all going to be a part of that conversation with your lender. They are going to be required to give us a loan status update within 10 days of contract acceptance. The common practice is to get one every week, so we'll probably see a few of them throughout the process, but technically they're only supposed to give us one. So just kind of know that if we don't get one, then we'll kind of ask you to help us push that along. Again, the loan application within 3 days of contract acceptance. They'll be processing that loan during escrow, and we'll be checking off which type of financing that you're going to be going with. Conventional, FHA, or VA are the most common. We'll outline if we need the seller to pay for any of those seller concessions or closing costs. In our market right now, we're not seeing much of this, but as things shift and it shifts more in the favor of buyers, you can start to see some of that stuff come back in. Now, as part of a financing contingency, you have an appraisal contingency. So the appraisal is different than the inspection. It's going to be a third party that goes out on behalf of the bank or the mortgage company to make sure that property value is there. So they're doing an independent assessment of the sellers, the buyers, and determining what that value is. Now, it is an opinion, and you can fight it sometimes, but that's generally the amount that the bank will loan on. So if it comes in low, we might have a problem that we'll need to renegotiate. So we're going to outline who pays for that appraisal initially. It's going to be either you or the seller, and then whether or not that will come out of your concessions if you ask for any up here. So part 3 is all about title. So here's where we're going to put in our title company. They will be helping you figure out how you want to take title. And so what that means is, like, if you're single, you'll be taking title as a single person. If you're doing it by yourself and you're married, you'll be doing sole and separate. If you're doing it married, you might do community property. You might do joint tenants. They'll kind of go over some of that with you, but it's ultimately your choice on how you want to do that. They'll also be pulling the title commitment and title insurance policy. They'll be looking back through any CC&Rs, any HOA rules, and sharing all of that information with you so that you know exactly the rules that you have to abide by with this property in mind. So you'll get all of that in email form about a week after you sign off on this contract. They are the one facilitating this whole contract. So if we have to make any changes, it'll be an addendum format, and we'll be sharing that as instructions for them on how to proceed with our transaction. So they'll be prorating taxes. So the seller will actually pay you money at title to pay taxes on their behalf when they come due. We pay taxes in arrears here in Arizona, meaning you pay it after the time that you've been there. You are giving your earnest money over for them to release if there's a dispute to whichever side is in contract compliance and which side is not in contract compliance. So it's really important that we maintain our timelines and you follow the contract to the T so that you're protecting that earnest money should we have to cancel. They'll be prorating any assessments or any liens. If there's anything that stays post-closing, they'll be handling that proration so that you take over for the time that you own it and you're not paying for the time that they did. This number 4 part is all about disclosure. So sellers are going to be giving you a disclosure statement. We call this a SPUDS, SPDS, SPUDS. It's 6 or 7 pages of the history of the property that they're telling you the condition, what they know about the major components in the home, if there's been any work that's been done, that type of stuff. They'll also be delivering an insurance claims history report within 5 days of accepting that contract. It only has to go back for 5 years. And so what you want to know is if there's been any major insurance claims, anything like that going on. And a really good thing to do is to call your insurance agent and give them the address and ask for a quote. If it's outrageous, there's probably been some history there and some reason for caution. If it looks good to you, then just run with it. If we have a foreign seller, you might be liable to pay for the taxes on their sale. Title generally holds that money, but it's just an added thing in there for dealing with a FIRPTA situation. So a foreign investor or a foreign seller owning the property that we're buying. So if we are buying a house that's built prior to 1978, so 1977 or older, there is a chance that there was lead-based paint in that home. So you get the opportunity to run through inspections and check for any of that stuff. Should you be concerned, they'll also be giving us an extra disclosure on whether or not they have any knowledge of that lead in that house. So if we're in a county island, we'll be talking about affidavits of disclosure. And if there's any changes to those disclosure statements, the seller has to immediately notify us of changes to the condition of the property. And you get a chance to view that statement and view those repairs or decide to cancel the contract should you disapprove of whatever happened. There are a couple of warranties that survive closing. So the condition of the property should be the same at the end of our transaction as it was when you first saw it. So that's what a seller is agreeing to, is the day that you get that offer accepted, that property should look exactly the same or as close as reasonably possible to what it should look like when they hand over the keys. Anything that happens immediately afterwards, especially for those first 5 months here, 150 days, it's hard to prove that a seller knew that there was something that they band-aided along and they knew that there was a problem and now it's not working, so it's their fault. But there are some warranties that survive closing. So, we can have extra conversations about that. We have not given any warranties to the seller of anything there. So generally we write none here. Our due diligence period is our inspection period. Normally this is 10 days. And so this is when you want to get your inspectors in, your termite guy, your sewer line scope, your AC check, any of that stuff that you're worried about. Go back through our buyer's advisory, which we talked about up front, and click on any of those links. Look through the neighborhood, look through your HOA documents if you have them yet. Call your insurance agent, any of that stuff, and really make sure that this is the house for you based on everything you can research and find out. If you're concerned about the size of the house, you can measure. We already mentioned termites. Flood zones is another one you could look for. We talked about insurance. Most properties are going to be on a sewer system. We do some in the rural areas that do have septic, so we'll check either of those corresponding boxes. So if a sewer is a big deal to you, whether or not that line is good, you want to get that inspection. If you're concerned about a swimming pool regulation for a different city that you're moving to, you want to make sure you look into those. Your inspection is based on your comfort level, not mine. Everybody's comfort level is different, and so you are going to be responsible for that decision making sure that this is the house for you. So once we've done all of those inspections, if there's anything that you disapprove of condition-wise, say the AC needs some work, there's a leak in the roof, there's, what are some of the other big ones? There's the water heater's not working, something like that. You get the opportunity to then go to that seller and say, hey, I'm disapproving of these items. Can we correct them? So at the end of those 10 days, you deliver your inspection notice. They have 5 days to review your request and get back to you with a yes, no, or maybe. Once they deliver something, anything different than what you've asked for, you get 5 days then again as the buyer to look that over and decide if you're ready to move on with your contract. So your inspection period can technically last for up to 20 days. They generally don't, but they can. The part right here, that your home warranty plan, we recommend a home warranty at least the first year of your home ownership in your new home, because then you've kind of gone through all 4 seasons. You've gotten a little bit familiar with the way the house operates, things work, stuff like that. And you can decide at that point whether or not you want to renew. But we get to choose in this contract here whether or not we want to order one. And we always want to keep control over which plan we order with any additional coverage. And we'll put a dollar figure here. So we want to know right now is, are you guys going to pay for it? Or are we going to ask the seller to pay for it? Or are we going to split it? Or if we're not going to get one at all. So the seller is making the house available for you for your inspection walkthroughs during your inspection period and your final walkthrough at the end, just a couple days before we close. So again, we're talking about the foreign sellers. Part of the purchase price is going to be withheld to pay taxes on that property. So that's why they want you to know about that. You might be liable if that seller skips out on those taxes. Should anything not be in place here with the rest of the contract, we have some remedies. So the first one is a cure period, which is like a slap on the wrist. It's a 3-day notice to whoever is outside of the contract terms to get back into the contract terms and fix that problem. So if you cure somebody and slap them, you give them the 3 days and they don't come back into compliance with that contract, that injured party can issue a breach and cancel. It is the only way a seller can cancel a contract, is if the buyer defaults, they cure them, and then they issue a breach. So keep that in mind. Those timelines are going to be crucial. So should we have an issue with any of that, we'll go we like to go through agents, then brokers, then mediation before we go to arbitration. So it's kind of the level of escalation there. Then everybody is responsible for their own attorney fees to go through any of that. If we're adding in any additional terms, so some of the things that we might be putting in here would be escalation clauses, whether or not the seller is a licensed realtor, if you're buying it for investment purposes, if there's leases in place, anything like that, you might see additional terms come up. Then on our last page here, if there's an act of God and the property gets damaged by, say, we've got a monsoon coming in right now. So say there's a storm coming and a tree falls in the house and the damage is more than 10% of that contract. You can cancel, no big deal. If it's less than 10%, the seller just has to fix it and we have to move on. So time is of the essence. This is a big deal. We've talked about it a number of times in this little run through of a contract here. Our timelines are crucial to keeping that earnest money safe and keeping in compliance with the contract. So sellers pay our sales commission, so you don't need to worry about that unless we've talked about it outside of this contract. Any days that we talk about always begin at whatever the next 12 o'clock a.m. is. So if everybody signs this today, I don't care if it's after business hours, first thing in the morning, doesn't matter. Tomorrow would start day one of your inspection period. If the seller signed it at 12:30 tonight, then the next day would be our inspection period. So you almost get like a whole free day then. The next day would be the start of this contract in our timelines. So the seller does have that right to accept backup contracts all the way up until close of escrow. So they can hedge their bets in case we cancel. And if we do need to cancel this contract, there are certain processes that we need to follow. So we'll just stay in communication through this whole process, make sure that we're good and on board. So this last part here is this is a decision that you are making. We can guide you through the process, but it is ultimately your decision to buy a house. And then we're going to be asking for a time of acceptance. So we want the seller to respond by a specific time that we're giving them. And then we'll go through, and this will be our information representing you as the buyer, or if it's a listing that we have represented, it'll be both buyer and seller because both of you guys would be our client. Then you would sign here, and we would do the same thing for the listing agent, and then they would sign down here. So the one thing to note here is they might, instead of signing this offer, they might submit a counter. So a counter would be changing a specific term and then submit it back to us for our final acceptance or another counter. So the process can go on a little bit if terms need to be changed before we get that final contract. But that's kind of the run through. So if you need anything else or want to talk through any of those extra addendums, or have questions about this contract specifically in relation to your property, let me know. Happy to answer.